Brennan, let's start with our big question here. The Oklahoma City Thunder, they get Alex Caruso for the low, low price of Josh Giddey. They got Isaiah Hartenstein. They went out and got the premier center in this year's free agency class, a guy who fits them, I think, perfectly in a lot of ways, which we'll get into. They had this window to spend, and they have taken it. So this begs the question. They were the 1 seed last year, obviously losing the second round. Don't make the finals. But they're adding to what worked last year with these moves after being the 1 seed and at least putting up a good fight against Dallas, even if it didn't go their way. To you, are they now the favorites in the Western Conference?
I think so. I have the same questions about them that I had last year to a degree, and we can get into that. But I think that they became a ton more versatile and just more trustworthy, given that, if nothing else, Caruso and Hartenstein are guys that are going to be just more reliable, more of a sure thing at their role. I also think because, relatively speaking, they had cap space and they only had to give up Giddey, like you said, for Caruso, my hope is, as opposed to maybe, the Pelicans with DeJounte Murray, for instance, like, they don't have to play Hartenstein 35 minutes to satisfy whatever commitment that they made to him or make sure Caruso is in the closing lineup every night. They can just sort of add to the mix of what already made them special, but obviously as well, be something different that they didn't have before. So I think both guys could help with the rebounding and kind of physicality that they were lacking at times. We obviously know Hartenstein's going to be somebody who can defend the biggest bigs, give their offense a little bit of a new dimension. But that's kind of back to the concerns maybe that I still have. Their offense bogging down.
Yeah.
More than rebounding, more than guarding Kyrie Irving or whatever, and Luka. That is to me why they didn't get over the hump this year. Now, maybe Shea has another level to get to, but J-Dub definitely does. Yeah, those are still going to be their two lead offensive guys. That still needs to get there, but also, like you said, they were the 1 seed. So how much, and they made it to Game 7 of the second round. So how much better are you really asking them to have to get in order to be that favorite than they already were? Probably not much, and maybe it is those marginal moves that get them there. So I think that they, on paper, are the team that everyone else has to kind of stack themselves up against right now in terms of talent and depth and everything else.
I think that's right, and I think I'm really glad you brought up J-Dub in particular, but also Shea, because the moves that they made are good in a vacuum. Those are winning basketball players. Contending teams, I guarantee you, every contending team in the league would want Alex Caruso on their basketball team. I think most teams, even if they don't need a traditional center, look at Isaiah Hartenstein and his passing, his cutting, his rim protection, all of that stuff, and think that's a center I'd really like to have. The Knicks are absolutely going to miss him. Like, the Knicks are going to look different next year without him. He was awesome for them this past year in particular, with the Mitchell Robinson stuff. But this all, to me, Brandon, comes together because you have the J-Dub evolution that can still come. Whether that's shot making, whether that's his handle, whether that's like a more diversified offensive game, whatever that is going to look like, that's a part of this. Those and Shea being in his prime or like inching towards his absolute prime, I think there's still room for him to get better. I'm curious to see how like Team Canada for him this summer builds for him, because I do believe in the idea that your international experience can be a step, like another boost.
Wait a second, when we were covering the World Cup, you laughed at me for overvaluing this stuff.
Brendan, I'm all the way in. I've been doing Olympic roster. We're going to talk about the Olympics a lot in the show. I've been looking at Olympic rosters. I read a Luka Doncic.
So I got you, is what you're saying.
Yeah, you hooked me in. I read a Luka Doncic quote today where he was like, I'm in a country of 2 million people. I'm so thrilled. This means something. I'm in. That and like watching the Euros.
Maybe I was just going to say, maybe it's the international soccer tournaments getting you back in the field.
That and getting really mad at Greg Berhalter Just really good stuff. You know, we're doing great. But
I'll just say,
yeah.
look, Brandon Ingram, we saw this coming in terms of the fit with Zion and the questions. If you watched him, and if you watched Ant, I'm just saying, even the World Cup, when it's not the best of the best Team USA, we still got a peek at a lot of the narrative. So I'm on board with you. And I do think that helped Shea last fall. I think it did for sure. He led that team way further than we thought, and he was doing the same. I mean, I know he was an MVP vote getter the previous year too, but he's just kept getting better. So I don't think that's going to slow down. It's just a matter of how. I think kind of similar to J-Dub. It's like they just play such a style that maybe changing that style a little bit is going to be part of how they get better.
Yeah, I mean, I think J-Dub would be the one. I think Shea. I was trying to find MVP ads for next year because I'm thinking about a Shea MVP bet as we're talking about this. Like, they had initial MVP ads that might not be up anymore from BetMGM, but J-Dub feels like the one where you could see like an evolution. I think in a different way. Shea just might like refine everything and be that much harder to guard and a little stronger, a little older, a little more mature. All of that stuff. Maybe just like maybe both of them just benefit from Caruso, even if he's a little bit unwilling to shoot at times. Like, isn't going to be the negative impact on spacing in the way Giddey was, right? And like Hartenstein will give them more than other Jalen Williams would give them in terms of playmaking and screen setting and infrastructure from the center position. But J-Dub, if there's like a mid-range game, if there's like more efficient post-ups, like if there's just another element to his game that he can like add to it and it diversifies. And that gives you like another layer of offense to beat defense in the playoffs, beat teams now that have a full season of film and tape and scouting reports on you to kind of build different ways to attack your offense next year from a defensive perspective. Like, that is just going to make them harder to guard. And then you throw in Chet Holmgren, who is also really good and like is going to be better next year. There's no way that guy isn't a more complete, more refined player next year. So I think, Brendan, you put this like growth, this youth that they still have on their side right now, like that youth clock is still very much in their favor paired with these moves, and I'm in agreement with you. This is on paper right now my number one favorite in the West next year. I love the upside. They have more upside, I think, of any team in the conference right now. I love the moves they've made. They've had the best offseason, I think, of any team in the league so far, in my opinion, except for maybe Philly. I love everything about this team, and there's no reason not to be all in on the Thunder for next year.
Yeah, they were the third offense and the fourth defense in the regular season. Again, 57 wins, sorry. In the playoffs, their offense, just to back up statistically what we're saying, is what fell. They were the 10th best offense in the NBA in the playoffs. So that's where I think you have to expect growth. Jalen Williams, to me, one easy thing. Well, it's not easy, but one obvious thing, I should say, is he took 95 pull-up threes in 71 games. He took 272 pull-up twos. So maybe stretch that out a little bit. Maybe find ways to be a little bit different than Shea. Maybe that's kind of what it is the differentiation between when each of those guys has the ball and maybe what the approach might be. Because I think Shea's perfectly content to be off ball at times. But if it's like you're trading out very similar types of possessions with Shea running things versus J-Dub, and it's just a little worse, then that kind of speaks to when Shea's off the court or, whatever, you're going to get less out of your offense. But he had a 22 usage last year.
Yeah. And
more than a third of his shots were threes. He was really a pick and pop off-ball guy. If I don't think they're going to be putting the ball in his hands to run things right away in year two, but can he operate, attack switches more consistently in the post or, in an ISO type of environment? Can he, get out in transition, maybe grab and go at times? Can you just start to piece together things that make him really special that bring a new wrinkle? Because, again, I'm not convinced, and part of what happened with their offense wasn't just Jalen Williams. It's a little ridiculous to put it all on him, but Dallas also just clogged things. Dallas didn't buy that their shooters were real, and that isn't going to change just because Lou Dort had a great season. You bring in Alex Caruso, he's questionable, like you said. So I guess just to wrap on the Thunder side of it before we see if these other teams can compete, that is part of what I like about the Hartenstein thing is that he's not just Andre Drummond, right?
Yes.
Like we kind of would have been okay with that player, but instead they get a guy who can be a dribble handoff hub, set better screens than some of their other bigs, create advantages in space and manipulate a defense in new ways that obviously they believe will be helpful. Otherwise, you don't bring him in. You don't bring Isaiah Hartenstein in to go stand in the corner and launch threes or, just set a screen and go get out of the way, right? Like if you're bringing him in, it's because you think his skill set can help you. And so they won't be such a 5-out team and they won't be so dependent on the first guy who touches the ball in a possession or the second guy and kind of maybe, they're not a one-pass offense team. They can get it moving around the arc, but a lot of time it's drive and kick. He's different.
Yeah, Hartenstein's a good, especially for a big, he's a very good passer. Like, he is a very smart, calculated, timely passer. It's very easy to imagine J-Dub, Caruso, maybe a little less Caruso, but J-Dub, Dort, Wiggins, Isaiah Joe, a little more as a shooter. But, you can imagine all the things they can do with the cutters off ball. And by the way, in addition to the free agency moves they made, paying up for your role guys who are good, and some of that is create tradable contracts, all of that stuff. I wouldn't say this is just we love these guys guaranteed. But the fact that they also are paying these role guys who they could have just tried to keep for another year at really cheap costs, they're saying we're going to lock you in now and pay you your market value because we need to keep you in value. That's also really good business from Sam Presti to go ahead and do that. That's just really, really smart and thinking ahead. Look at the structure of the contract. Hartenstein's 2 years, 60 basically, and then there's a third year non-guarantee. They can renegotiate, figure it out from there. They've built in flexibility with these things as well. I love everything about this. I can't wait to watch as much Thunder as possible. I'm doing a very early list, Brendan, of teams I need to make sure I just am watching as much as possible now, post doing Locked On Cavs and that stuff. I can just bounce around a little bit more freely. Very excited to just crush tons of Thunder next year. Shea, by the way, plus 600 for MVP. So you bet $10, you win 70. I like that.
Do they have championship odds? Where are the Thunder versus these other West teams?
Let me pull this up. Jason Tatum, by the way, still plus 1,800 to win MVP.
Is that higher or lower? I don't know what you mean.
I'm just saying it's just he's perpetually going to be just very far off the bat.
The Thunder are plus 800 to win the championship. They are second to Denver in the West, so maybe we should go there next.
Yeah, I see another book. I'm not going to name it, but they're at plus 800. Boston's at plus 300, Thunder at plus 800, Philly at plus 800, the Knicks at 825, and the Nuggets at plus 875. So you could get them, but so in some, depending on where you look, perhaps the number one odds in the West.